Picture two people, same city, same year, same starting salary, $52,000 a year. One of them retires at 58 with $2.3 million. The other retires at 67 with $190,000. Both worked their entire lives. Both were reasonably careful with money. Both thought they were doing the right things. The difference between them was not luck. It was not a windfall. It was not crypto. It was not a business. It was a decision made in one afternoon, a single enrollment form, a number changed from 0 to 6. That is not a metaphor. That is math. And most people in this country have never had it explained to them clearly. So let's fix that. Here is a number that should bother you. The median American retirement account balance for people between the ages of 55 and 64, people who are about to retire, is roughly $134,000. Not per household, per person. $134,000. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate, that is $5,360 a year. That is $447 a month. That is not a retirement. That is a slow emergency. And yet, in this same country, there are more than 21 million 401k millionaires, people who built seven-figure wealth through ordinary jobs, ordinary salaries, and a system that most Americans either don't understand, don't trust, or simply never started. The gap between those two groups is not income, it is not intelligence, it is not even discipline in the way people usually mean it. It is understanding how the mechanism actually works, because the mechanism is almost offensively simple, and it is hiding in plain sight. Most people have a mental model of wealth that looks something like this. You earn money, you spend less than you earn, you save the difference. Over time, the pile gets bigger. That model is not wrong, it is just dangerously incomplete, because it treats saving as addition, and the actual wealth-building system that exists in this country operates on multiplication, specifically on a mathematical phenomenon that Albert Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. He may or may not have actually said that, but whoever said it was not wrong. Compound interest. Now, stay with me. I know you have heard this before. I know it sounds like something a guidance counselor puts on a poster, but the reason most people know the phrase and still end up with $134,000 at 65 is that they have never actually felt the math. They have never watched it move. So, let's watch it move. Start with $10,000. Put it in an investment account returning 10% a year, which roughly is the S&P 500's historical average before inflation. Year 1, $11,000. Fine, $1,000, nothing exciting. Year 5, $16,105. Okay, some momentum. Year 10, $25,937. Getting interesting. Year 20, $67,275. Year 30, $174,494. Year 40, $452,593. Same $10,000, no additional contributions, just time. Now here is where it gets strange. Look at the last decade of that timeline, years 30 to 40. In just those 10 years, the account grew by $278,000, more than the entire first 30 years combined. That is not a trick of presentation. That is compounding. The growth generates growth, which generates more growth, until the original money is almost irrelevant. The engine is running on its own output. And this is the first hidden truth. Wealth building is not linear, it is exponential. It starts slow, frustratingly slow, and then it accelerates in a way that feels almost unfair if you stayed in the game, and absolutely brutal if you got out early. Here is the part people find genuinely uncomfortable. Let's say you have two people. We will call them early and late. Early starts investing $300 a month at age 22. She does it for 10 years. Then she stops completely, never contributes another dollar, just lets it sit. Late starts at 32. He invests $300 a month every single month for 33 years, all the way to age 65. Who has more money at 65? Early does, by a significant margin. Early put in $36,000 total. Late put in $118,800. Late contributed more than 3 times as much money, over more than 3 times as long, and still lost. Because Early had a 10-year head start. And those 10 years, the ones between 22 and 32, are mathematically the most valuable years of a person's financial life. No one tells you this at 22, and by 32, most people are dealing with mortgages, kids, and the general expensive chaos of adult life. The window quietly closes. This is not to make anyone feel bad about when they started. It is to make very clear what the system is actually rewarding. It is not rewarding savings rate. It is not even rewarding investment skill. It is rewarding time in the market above almost everything else. Now let's zoom out to the infrastructure. The American wealth-building system runs on 3 primary vehicles. They are not secrets. They're just wildly misunderstood in terms of how they interact. The first is the 401k. This is an employer-sponsored account where you contribute pre-tax dollars, your employer often matches a portion of your contribution, and the whole thing grows tax-deferred until retirement. The second is the Roth IRA. You contribute after-tax dollars, so no deduction up front, but when you withdraw the money in retirement, you pay 0 taxes, not reduced taxes, 0. The third is a standard brokerage account. No tax advantages, but also no limits, no restrictions, and no penalties for pulling your money out. The order in which you use these matters enormously. The conventional wisdom, still largely correct, is first contribute enough to your 401k to capture the full employer match. That match is an immediate, guaranteed 50 to 100% return on your contribution, depending on the plan. There is no investment in the world that competes with that. Then max your Roth IRA. Then go back and max the 401k, then taxable accounts. Simple, but here is what most people actually do. They contribute just enough to get the match and then stop, telling themselves they'll do more later. Later becomes the next year becomes 5 years, 5 years is roughly $100,000 in growth they never had. Or they contribute to the 401k but pick the wrong fund, usually a target date fund with high fees or a collection of actively managed funds that underperform the index and charge 1.2% annually for the privilege. That 1.2% compounded over 30 years can cost you more than $200,000 on a $100,000 account. Not 1.2% of your returns, more than double your original investment, gone. Here is where this gets more complicated. Everything I have described so far assumes something that is not true for a significant portion of Americans. It assumes you have money left over after your expenses. The median household income in America is around $74,000 a year. After federal and state taxes, housing costs, transportation, healthcare, food, and childcare for a family, in many cities there is no money left. Sometimes there's less than nothing. The wealth-building system we just walked through is genuinely powerful. It is also built on a foundation that requires disposable income. And the uncomfortable math is that wage growth in this country has not kept pace with the cost of living for most working Americans in decades. Real wages, wages adjusted for inflation, for the bottom half of earners are roughly what they were in the 1970s. The assets those same people need to build wealth, housing, equities, education, have inflated dramatically faster than income. This is not a political statement, it is an arithmetic observation. The latter works, but the first rung is higher off the ground than it used to be. For people who do have disposable income and are not yet using it, the argument is simply use the system. It was designed with significant tax advantages specifically to encourage this. Treat it like a bill. Automate it. Forget it exists. For people who do not have disposable income, the wealth gap is not a personal failure. It is a structural condition. The math does not discriminate, but the economy that precedes the math absolutely does. Every few years, a new wealth-building story takes over the cultural conversation. In the early 2000s, it was real estate. In the 2010s, it was index funds and then tech stocks. In the early 2020s, it was crypto, NFTs, and the general idea that getting rich quickly had somehow become democratized. None of those are inherently bad, but the narrative around them tends to do something specific and damaging. It makes the boring path look stupid. When your neighbor is supposedly up 300% on Dogecoin, contributing $300 a month to a Vanguard index fund feels embarrassingly quaint, like bringing a ham sandwich to a Michelin star restaurant. What the narrative never shows you is what happens next: the crash, the tax bill, the fact that most people who rode those waves up also rode them down because they had no idea when to get off, and because getting off feels like losing when the thing is still going up. The academic literature on this is pretty clear. Most retail investors underperform the index. Most people who try to time the market, pick individual stocks, or chase returns end up worse than they would have been in a boring index fund started at 22 and forgotten. The wealth stories that make headlines are survivorship bias in action. For every person who turned $10,000 of crypto into $1 million, there are several thousand who turned $10,000 into $700 and a complicated tax situation. The boring path is not sexy, but it is the path where the math reliably works. There is a level above all of this that most personal finance content never discusses. At its core, wealth is not about how much money you make, it is about the relationship between assets and liabilities. An asset is something that generates income or appreciates in value. A liability is something that costs you money over time. Most Americans spend the majority of their productive financial years accumulating liabilities, car payments, credit card balances, mortgages larger than they need, while believing they are building wealth. A house can be an asset. It can also be a liability, depending on the price you paid, the interest rate, the market you bought in, and whether you plan to stay. Many people who feel wealthy because they own a home are, on closer inspection, house rich and cash flow poor, unable to retire, unable to invest, and one major repair away from a serious problem. The actual transfer of wealth in America, the durable kind, the generational kind, does not primarily happen through earned income. It happens through the appreciation of assets held over long periods of time. The top 10% of households own 93% of all equities in this country. That is not because they earn more, it is because they own things, things that compound, things that appreciate, things that generate income while they sleep. The wealth gap is, in meaningful part, an asset ownership gap. So here is where we land. The math works. The system, for people with access to it, is genuinely one of the most powerful wealth-building mechanisms ever devised. A middle-class income, a 30-year timeline, and consistent behavior can produce outcomes that look almost unreasonable from the outside. But the system was not designed with everyone in mind equally. The tax advantages largely benefit people who already have something to contribute. The greatest returns go to those who start earliest, which means the people who most need the math to work in their favor are often the ones with the least runway to use it. And the broader economy, the wages, the costs, the barriers to entry, is not making the first rung any easier to reach. So the question worth sitting with is not really about compound interest. It is about what kind of society generates a system this effective, makes it theoretically available to everyone, and then watches half its population retire with barely enough to cover a year's worth of expenses. Is that a math problem, or is the math just showing us something we already knew and preferred not to look at directly?